أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Radiance Podcast by the Jafari Academy. This evening we have an exciting discussion ahead of us on a slightly different approach to students' education. It involves an integration of subjects combined with hands-on learning, and it's very befitting to the ever-developing world we're living in at the moment, with its ever-changing and advancements in technology and industry. Our guest, Dr. Samia Shah, will help us understand STEM education and how it contributes positively to students' development. Dr. Samia has attained a PhD in clinical immunology from UCL, and she's worked in research and development over the past 10 years, and presently she's working as a consultant in clinical research for a global pharma company. A very warm welcome, Samia. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the podcast this evening.
Wa alaikum salam, sister. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's start with the acronym STEM. If you could let us know what that stands for.
Absolutely. So STEM, the acronym stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And it's a program that's been developed over the years to incorporate all these different core subjects into one.
Okay.
Teaching students in a way.
Okay. So the fact that it's an acronym and the subjects are grouped together, what does that mean in regards to the approach to learning? Because when you're in the mainstream school, each subject is delineated to its specific time and place in the timetable. But with STEM and the integration of the 4 subjects that you mentioned, how is that? What approach does that mean in terms of students learning?
The approach is, there are 2 schools of thoughts on this. Mm-hmm. One school of thought is that you have a fully integrated STEM program within the school. And that means all the core subjects are muddled into one, and it becomes just the one subject, basically. Mm-hmm. Science, technology, which is partly computing and computer science, and mathematics all in one, bringing up a generation of creative collaborators, innovators. Mm. And there's a second school of thought, and that school of thought is the one that is closest to heart, to be honest. And that's the one where STEM program is more of a supplement to the core subjects. So you'll continue teaching the core subjects, science, technology, mathematics, as normal, following the national curriculum. But on top of it, you supplement the education of those really important subjects with STEM.
Okay.
And so that's the kind of approach that is actually closest to me. That's the one that I fall back on a lot. And I feel that that's the most appropriate for students, for children.
Okay. So before we go into the rationale of the STEM education and what we might expect our children to gain from that way of learning, to help set the scene for us and get a better understanding as parents and students and educators, can you give us an example or two of a typical STEM session and what may be involved in that session for the student who's partaking in it?
Absolutely. It really depends on the age. So STEM program starts from very early on, and the idea is that you start from primary years towards secondary, towards A-levels, and so on. When you're at the primary level, you have to set the scene. It's the basic science. You have to set the scene to how you want to teach the basic science to these children. And so it's different. It depends. It's staggered, really. And the approach that I am taking is very much, I set the scene of STEM. I start by giving an example of a very simple experiment. Two metal sticks attached to a circuit, attached to a couple of wires, to a motor that I've stolen from a machine of some sort that I don't need anymore, or a clock that I don't want anymore, and literally taking it out into wires, into a metal, and immerse that into half a lemon, half an orange. And with that, I'm introducing so many different things. I'm introducing a circuit an electric circuit. I'm introducing the idea of metal and conduction, electricity, electrical conduction. So many things, some very, very important things that have been set up here in a simple, tiny experiment. And that's the kind of idea that I think STEM tries to achieve in the school system. Another example is a simple cell, animal cell. The approach in the textbook is that it's drawn flat, 1D, that's it, a 1D flat cell. But in a STEM program, you introduce them to the idea that there are people who are performing research, high-end research, very innovative research, such as NASA or Harvard University. And what they've done is they've applied nanotechnology, huge idea, nanotechnology, nano cameras inserted into the cell, videoing what happens inside the cell. And for you to show that, you're sharing a couple of things. You're sharing, and you're making the mind more inquisitive. So the students want to inquire a bit more. I have a flat cell, but suddenly I have this alive, a cell that's come live in front of me. It's moving, just like I'm moving my hands right now. Of course, the cells have to move. There is energy. Or going inside the plant cell and sharing how the plant cell is making noise with that energy. That technically, it's a real noise that's been made. That's the next level that I want, or I think the other scientists and engineers and people who are part of that program want to introduce to the education system and to the learning programs that we currently have at school.
I think those are two really good examples. And I think, inshallah, if we have time a bit later on, I'd love to hear a little bit of, more different things from your experience. I was wondering if we could go now into the rationale of this approach to learning and what we can expect students to gain from taking part in STEM-based education. And I understand, there is a lot of literature out there, and there may be a lot of benefits to this approach. But perhaps, you'd like to break it down a little bit and start with, for example, the skill base that students may learn from taking part in STEM education.
Absolutely. If I may start with the idea of STEM, where did these acronyms come and start? Who started it and why? And the reason really behind it is there was research done both in the UK and in the US, and they identified a gap in the market, in the workforce market, in which possibly around 16% of the workforce that involves the STEM kind of workforce, so people in technology, people in innovative work, engineers, are sort of not really going into those fields anymore. So new generation is not really interested in those fields. And they identified around 3 million work places completely empty. And the prediction came true over the years. And so the worry started then. And I think this was around 2005, 2006 that research happened. And so STEM came into play. And the approach of a new education system came into play. And the introduction started slowly. It was more for people who are sort of more academic, and a family that's very much academically equipped, or people of high earning in the society, high earners. And so it wasn't really introduced to everybody. It was more of a very special part in the society that got introduced to this idea. Slowly it increased and it became more available to more and more people. So we have different programs at the moment available for people who want to take the STEM approach. But and that's the reason I wanted to sort of just take you back into the reasons behind it. So the approach is going to teach, and it's not literally just words, but the approach will teach students 400% creativity, collaboration. It will teach them innovation. It will teach them ways of problem solving. We know that the world has become complex. Even before COVID, it became a complex world, and that's because of new technology, new ideas, new needs as well that have come about. And so therefore the world is complex, and to match to that complexity of the world, we had to do something. We had to change the way that these new generations of students are learning and developing those skills. And I think in the examples that I shared, those skills will definitely be educated on a weekly basis, on a yearly basis, and the development you will see and you will create in your students.
I think some of the skills you mentioned, like collaboration and critical thinking and problem solving, it's interesting because when you read about STEM, under the umbrella of the benefits that students may learn, along with skills, like in the list of skills, there's I found that there's a statement that comes up time and again, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on it. So I read somewhere, it says that STEM introduces children to the idea that mistakes are normal and positive, and they feel confident and free in embracing these mistakes. And they identify that as a positive feature towards the student's development. What do you think about that?
I love that statement, and that's absolutely true. And I wish I had the STEM program when I was in education, when I was a young girl learning science and maths and technology. I learned about STEM a lot later in life, and I had actually completed everything, all my education, and I had moved into the workforce. But I was very close to working with engineers and innovators and creators. And I spoke to one of the engineers and just asked him, what advice do you give me in life to be successful? And he basically shared a diagram, and it was so funny, of an engineer, how an engineer works. And it was literally concept after concept, bouncing off, making mistakes, not going into anywhere, into development, and continuing those mistakes and learning from them until you end up with a prototype, and then you end up with a developed product, and then you end up with a successful product. You trial it and you sell it, literally, and for the bettering of, or for a problem-solving product. And so that's definitely resonates with me, because it's a very similar approach to the colleague of mine that shared that advice.
I think you explained it really well, because we're always fearful that our children must learn within a way in which they're always learning and benefiting. And sometimes that exploration that comes along with that learning is curtailed. And what I really liked about the STEM environment is that, bearing in mind, it's all educational settings and environments, when they involve children with safeguarding and risk assessments, are usually aimed at being risk-free. So when you hear about children being able to embrace, in a confident manner, the mistakes in a risk-free environment, it just sets your mind up that they're able to explore. And if something doesn't work the first time, they build on it, like you said, the engineer did. They build on it, and they move into something greater that, tomorrow will be something that they can then work with in a working capacity. I think it's just so important that aspect of STEM is realized as part of the children's growth and development. I think it's also it's apparent that children gain skills. Okay, they gain communication, and they gain interaction with other people, and how to collaborate and how to problem solve. But is it only skills for their own personal development? So what I mean, for example, is that when they're put into the STEM environment and they undergo, STEM education or STEM sessions, and we expect them that, they'll come out gaining some personal development and growth. What is particular about STEM, though? Because what can those things that they gain in terms of personal development, how does that put them in good stead when they then go into the wider world and community tomorrow as, working individuals?
So I think it goes back to what I discussed earlier, which is, why did we develop STEM? What's the reason behind it? And it's not just those personal skills that you're going to develop that will make you successful in the future. It is also STEM is also there to teach you a way of thinking and solving problems for the bettering of the society. So it's not a personal skill that you're developing or learning. It is to better the society. It is to go into these roles that are now full of gaps and no one to fill those positions. And so it's actually for the bettering of the society. So for myself, working on a product that I know will 100%, 110% improve the quality of life of a patient, I'm bettering the society. I'm going to get somebody who is possibly disabled due to a disorder, possibly a chronic disorder, and I would give them a new product, and that new product will give them life, literally. And I think one of the messages that resonates with me is from a patient who actually suggested to me that you gave us life. It was a questionnaire, and that was in the report. That's what you'd be doing. So it's not just for the personal skills. It's not for your personal development only, although that's extremely important, because if you don't have the development personally, you cannot be an effective person within a society, within a community. But the next level of STEM is to fill those gaps, to make you interested enough in being a problem solver, an innovator, a creator, and not being afraid of errors and mistakes, and continuing your efforts. You're passionate about what you're doing. It does not necessarily need to be in science as well. So my encouragement will not be science focused only, although I am a scientist, but it will encourage the student to be a creator in anything that they want to go into. So a business owner can be creative. A cake maker can be creative in the way they make cakes. I was watching something a few days ago, and this cake maker had made a cake on a sideways rather than the normal round, flat, on a sideways, and literally painted a portrait on the cake. I mean, that's creative, that's innovative. No, I've never seen something like that before. So that's the approach, or that's the idea behind STEM. It's not necessarily just building people to go into science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. On the contrary, it's to develop you as a person to be an innovator in any field you choose to go into.
And I think it's important to also mention that STEM education doesn't produce, and it's not the aim to produce people who are experts in all of those fields. So you don't have one person needing to be an expert in all of those fields, because you mentioned about collaborating with team members and multidisciplinary teams. So it's so important that the skill set that you bring into that team and the collaboration of drawing out the skills of all of the people in that team is one of the benefits of undergoing a STEM education, because, innovation and problem solving, it's working together with other people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. You're right. And I think I can't give a better example than my first job in the industry, because obviously I've come from a very academic background, but I ended up in the industry in companies who are producing either drugs or products. And the first job that I had was actually with a startup company. And usually in startups, what happens is it's obviously a tiny office. It's not as as lovely as a global company. And I remember the CEO used to sit behind me. On the right, I had the engineer. On the left, the director of strategy, and so on. And I think that equipped me. That made me 100% a collaborator. I wanted to be successful because I was surrounded by these amazing brains, so knowledgeable. I learned so much. And I think if I hadn't joined a startup initially, I would have not learned what I have learned and developed what I have developed to become successful in my next roles.
I think we're hearing a lot of really good things about STEM education. So as parents, okay, if we have children in mainstream education, what can we expect, like, from the schools? Like, can we expect that STEM will be a part of the curriculum or an additional, addition to it?
I mean, I'm obviously I'm not a teacher by background, so I really don't know what's going on inside sort of the different education systems at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
But from my end and from the end of my colleagues, and what I'm hearing is that we are trying. We are trying to approach the education system and go to the education ministry and so on, and introduce the idea of STEM and the necessity for it. And it's a few people, it's not many of us, but you'll see it, and it's across board. So you'll see it in different companies and people who are really interested in STEM, introducing it to a certain fraction of the society or to the overall society or overall education system. So some people are dreaming big and some people are dreaming small, and I think I'm hoping that our voices will be heard. I can assure you at Jaffrey Academy, the voice was definitely heard. And so I was very lucky that happened, because it's the Jaffrey Academy, the idea of it is an innovative idea. And so to bring on more innovation is just, it's great.
So if as parents, like, it's not yet in mainstream education and it's not part of the mainstream curriculum, then as parents, when you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing the benefits of this kind of platform of learning, and yet it's not yet in your children's school, what can we do then as parents? So for example, is there something we can source out? Are there opportunities we can source out for our children to access these kinds of programs somewhere?
There are opportunities, there are ways of doing this. I think there are different companies who actually have after school programs that are running for the children as well, introducing ideas of coding and robotics and all sorts of very, very innovative ideas that we definitely is the future. The children need to be equipped with these skills. So you do have it if you want to look for it. But I do feel that we, as parents, your main role with your children is an encouragement. You're working as an encourager. You're encouraging your children to be passionate about education. If you do that, you've succeeded. And I think for me, my half of the passion that I have for science stems from my family. My family introduced me to science. They love education. They introduced the idea of always aiming to be higher and higher in education and gaining more and more knowledge. And so when I see that and that encouragement, it's what's developed me. And I think if you don't have that encouragement and it's lacking, nothing will work. So as a parent, that's my advice to you. Encourage your children to be innovators. Encourage them to make a mistake and learn from it and move ahead and create more and better systems for themselves, and encourage them to be critical thinkers and innovators.
So is there anything parents can do in the actual home environment? Like, for example, if they're not always able to source out, these kinds of workshops or platforms of learning, can they do things in the home environment to help, develop that critical thinking and problem solving and hands-on learning approach?
Absolutely. And I think I've touched upon it a little bit, the whole doing a simple experiment together, making it a fun thing. So the whole half a lemon, citric acid, conduction and all that. You could do things like, I've done an experiment once with my son. I've got a 7-year-old, so a young child as well. And, I've done an experiment where I've basically mashed a banana, added some chemicals, and ended up with a DNA coming out of the banana. So, things like that. And it's visible. It shows that there is a planned experiment, because that's part of being a scientist. You plan your experiment. It shows that you perform it, and it shows the result, and then you discuss it as well, because they're obviously going to discuss it. A DNA is popping out into like a cloud in front of you, is that you're going to have to discuss and conclude and create a paper out of it.
So these kinds of ideas, like this banana experiment and things, I'm sure like the parents can sort of look them up onto the internet and get different ideas of what they can do with kids at home. Yeah? Absolutely.
I think they say that scientists make the best cooks. So cooking is also a form of biology. You're creating a reaction of some sort, and you can even do that, cook with your kids and teach them about the different reactions and so on. And I think definitely the internet is is full of different, different ideas and innovative ideas for your kids.
So you mentioned your son is 7, and I think that that's a great age for curiosity and fun. They still want to have fun. What if, let's talk about the age of a child. So what if, for example, in general, when we want to develop skills such as sport and different activities, we start the kids at a younger age, because then that gives them time to naturally gravitate to things of interest and then further develop their skill in that particular thing. For STEM, some of us have children who are a bit older than 7. Some of us have kids in their teenage years. Is it too late to start?
Absolutely not. And I think the way I'm approaching STEM in my programs is, of course, I would take into account that some students would have never heard about what STEM is and what I'm trying to introduce. So with the ages that are sort of younger ages, I start with, like I said, the very basic. But with the older, I have started with taking a different approach. So I've approached it in the form of biomimicry, which is how do you biologically mimic a problem-solving idea. Okay. So a new system of a plane looking at a bat, for example, or a butterfly. Creating a plane, or creating a new fabric that doesn't catch fire, but obviously mimicking other biological creations or biological equipment that you have around you. So I start with that idea and I build on it. That why is STEM so interesting? Because you're creating, but using biology, using your surrounding, and also it teaches them that science is simple. It's not difficult. And I think sometimes you have students coming in and they assume that science and mathematics is so difficult. That's the thought process behind it. It's very hard. It's very time consuming. I don't get it. And that's what I think that US study that I mentioned showed the drop of students not interested in STEM subjects, in STEM work. And it's literally because there was no introduction to science on a, first of all, simplified level, basic level, but then on top of it, the idea of how do I become more inquisitive? How do I learn more in a nice, staggered manner, but also at the same time, a way of trying to appreciate science and enjoy it and be passionate about it.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because, some of us might be mistaken to think that, well, our kids are not in tune to science or math, for example. And so, this isn't the way that we think that they're going to have any interest or develop in it. So I'm glad you really mentioned that, science is simple. It can be simple. And they don't have to be, sort of adept in the fields of science and math and technology to, take in the STEM way of learning. It can be, it's from what I'm hearing is the concepts within those subjects are broken down in such a way that everyone can take them on and adapt and learn from it.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. And that's exactly my message, that everyone can learn science, everyone can learn technology, and everyone can develop those skills that we have been mentioning, so far. But it needs to be, the approach needs to be the right approach. It's that's what's missing. The approach is sometimes, I think, in certain education systems is missing, and we need to sort of tackle it.
It's interesting that you say that, the approach, because when we hear about sort of the mainstream education, it's very much a platform whereby the teacher relays a certain set of information to the children. And when you hear about STEM, it's a nurturing of curiosity from the child, because the teacher creates a condition whereby the child has an opportunity for invention. So it's not, providing them with ready-made knowledge. It's providing them with an opportunity to learn the knowledge that's relayed to them, and work with it. So it's really, the approach to STEM and the way you're explaining it is really, really important for us to understand that it is a different way of learning. If, you mentioned that STEM has developed, over the years. Is there any newer developments that have come recently over the past couple of years with STEM that you can share with us? Or
Absolutely. So STEM, I think, for as I mentioned before, it started from around 2005, 2006, where the idea that we need STEM, there's a gap, let's work on this. And over the years, that was the sort of the idea, and it was getting developed slowly and introduced to different groups. And then after that, a lot of the scientists, a lot of the technologists started thinking that, to be honest, and research showed this as well, that to be fair, schools that have art as one of their main subjects, and as if they're focused on art as well, the teaching style and the outcome was a lot better, and the brain focus shared, in that research showed that the students were was a lot higher as well. But also creativity. So if I'm an engineer and I'm trying to introduce an idea, I'm trying to create an idea. If I am not somebody who can actually sit down and draw this and make this clear and visible, I can't take on or explain to others my idea very well if I haven't got an artistic background to my knowledge.
Right.
When I say artistic, I'm not talking about being able to draw portraits and being able to, draw for me the Eiffel Tower. It's not that kind of approach. I am talking about being creative, being able to show and share your ideas, but with art, by using art. And so the idea developed, and a new acronym came about, and that's STEAM. So that's science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And STEAM has shown that the combination of all these subjects with art improved, first of all, the learning. Also, the benefits of it is immensely higher compared to STEM. So that's the kind of the futuristic, or the future for STEM, that we want to incorporate art into it as well and have art as part of it. And
I think that actually covers a lot of the basis of what kids, are interested in. All of the core subjects, the fundamental subjects, the subjects of the future, technology, and then the creative side. And I think that's fabulous. I'd love to hear a little bit of, about your experience and how you came to, grasp STEM and have that be part of your work. And also, if you feel comfortable sharing some of your experiences in projects that you've done with kids, and how you found that they were able to work through some of those projects and the kind of results that they found in that.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned before, I've achieved a PhD from UCL. I've come from a very academic background. I did research for many years. I joined a department of academic oncology at a London hospital. I was with them for almost 10 years. I then joined the industry, and it was when I joined the industry that the STEM idea came about. And initially it was more of, we don't have enough engineers, we don't have enough scientists as in women. So women are not really joining that workforce. And so let's improve that, let's work with that. And so I joined that team, where they were working with young girls in colleges, encouraging them to take on STEM. And the approach again was, setting up programs, discussing how interesting it is, look at robotics, look at coding, look at technology. And thereafter, I decided that I want to embrace a bigger group and share the knowledge with more people. So I joined a program that was looking at STEM in refugee children. So Syrian, Afghan refugees, and it was, I think, part of Red Cross as well. And so I worked with them for a while, sharing a lot of my experiences as well. In fact, sharing a very personal thing with them as well, because I'm a refugee. I came to Europe as a refugee when I was very young. Although I wasn't. I don't remember most of it, but I was. And so sharing that, as well as on top of it being in the STEM industry, I think made it very alive. That this is something that you can do as well. I did it. You can do it. And so I worked with that for a while. And then in 2018, I became a consultant for a global company, a medical device and pharma company. And I started working with them. The idea became bigger, and we introduced it to immigrant children in colleges. So it could be second generation, first generation immigrant. And so it became bigger and bigger. And finally, I thought to myself, I want to take this further. I didn't know how to approach it. I was discussing it with different people, whether we should go to different schools, go to the education systems. How do we approach this? And we really need to work with children and make this very visible to them and available to everybody. And so I couldn't think of anybody but better than Jafariya Academy, as I suggested before as well. They're an innovative platform that came about in a very difficult time as well. And so I thought, I'll just introduce my innovative idea as well to them and make them aware of it. And that's where we are.
So have you seen, like, for example, with your son or any of your past experiences with the programs that you set up with the girls with engineering or the refugees, have you seen specific outcomes that you feel that, this actually ties in with our philosophy really nicely, and it cements that kind of learning that we're aiming to achieve? Have you seen examples of that?
I've seen outcomes. I've shared outcomes with the teams. We've celebrated. I think you deliver and you get the outcome, and then you encourage yourself, and then you start moving on. And so definitely with the immigrant children, I've definitely seen outcomes. I've joined a college where they were struggling with their students. Students were not achieving the grades that they should do. And they've ended up achieving great results and ending up in great universities, not just a university, no, great universities on great courses. Some of them inspired to do engineering and science, some of them inspired to do pharmacy, medicine. And so definitely seen a huge outcome. I think STEM definitely takes you into the next level of what you should develop and be passionate about in those subjects, in those core subjects.
And if kids are in, for example, secondary school, and they're in that phase of life where they're deciding, now what shall I do next in terms of career opportunities, and they're not quite sure. So what can these kinds of programs do to help, or even, suggest ideas to them if particular aspects of those, that acronym is of interest to them?
I think the first and foremost idea is that STEM programs are being introduced by people who are not really teachers. So you're not coming from sort of a place of authority that I am a teacher, I am going to teach you. It's more of, I am a scientist, or I'm an engineer, or I'm in technology, and I'm showing you that you can do it. So that's the bottom line. That's the approach, that you're showing a real life model of a person, of a human that's taken science and the passion for technology or engineering and mathematics or even art further and developed themselves. And so it's, like I said, a model of a human being in front of you who has achieved something. And I think that in itself is inspiring. You're inspiring a generation by just sharing your passion for something. Regardless of where the children want to end up, they could become lawyers or, like I said, business owners. It's not specifically just ending up as scientists. But with STEM, the idea is that we want to have more scientists and engineers and so on. So so that's the first and foremost, I think, thing that I want to put out to the parents, to the children, that we're here to inspire you. I want to inspire you to do better, to be passionate about your dreams, and that your dreams are achievable. You can achieve them by working hard, by learning, by being inquisitive. But I can say all these things, but without showing the children how to be inquisitive and creative and being inspired, you can't achieve it. STEM is a program, or STEAM is a program of showing the student, how do I become inquisitive? How do I become creative? Because a teacher could talk about it, day and night, but if you don't show, you can't achieve it. And that's the example that I gave earlier about the cell. Yes, you're reading in the textbook, an animal cell contains a nucleus and a mitochondria, one cell filament. It's not true. That's not the truth. And the world, we're now in the age of robotics, where surgeries are taking place completely with a robotic sometimes completely on its own. And so, when we're in that kind of age, a picture of a cell in a textbook is not enough. We need to go up a level, or maybe 2, or maybe 3, or maybe 100. But we do definitely need to go up a few levels to reach out to the students.
Yeah, but you say that the people who guide the sessions or lead the sessions on STEM are not necessarily teachers. They could be experts as scientists, etc. But I think the fact that they're not a teacher per se is not important, because they're actually still guiding the child through that process and through that experience, and helping the child come to an understanding that through this process of hands-on trial and error and experimenting and collaborating with everybody else, I am learning something, I am achieving something, isn't it? So you don't have to be a teacher. And like you mentioned, for example, you with your son, you wore the mother hat. I don't think you wore the scientist hat when you did the banana experiment with him.
Yes,
so you are a mother. So everybody in a capacity is able to help that child and guide that child through some kind of a session, a STEM-based session. You don't have to be a teacher, right?
No, you don't. You do not need to be. You just need to be passionate, and you need to be an encourager, and you need to be somebody who can inspire. That's what it is. You just need to be able to inspire the others. And I think that's something that you can only do if you're passionate about something, because you can't inspire if you aren't yourself not passionate about what you're trying to teach or what you're trying to educate in. The other thing as well that I do want to mention is that with the workforce, so with people in STEM, we are almost always challenged to go back and share ideas for the layman. So we're encouraged to go. So I would write a strategy for a clinical trial. It will be very complicated, very scientific, lots of jargon, lots of language that is only understood by possibly the team that I'm working with. But I am always asked by ethics, by Health Research Authority in the UK, or any other regulatory bodies in different globally. I obviously work with global markets as well, and by anyone, I'm always asked to take it a notch down. So make it to the layman. So automatically, I've learned to educate by just being in that field, because I need to take it a notch down. I need to educate. I need to explain my very complex idea to somebody who doesn't know anything about this. Not necessarily, a layman, as in, someone who does have no idea about science. Not necessarily, but just about this idea. So taking it down is already developing myself, developing my colleagues as educators, because I'm educating on the idea.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's giving back again to the community in a different way, isn't it? Not only you're providing a service, for example, like you mentioned earlier, saving lives, or one aspect towards saving lives, you're giving back to the community in a different way, and they're learning through your experiences and through your developments. I wanted to ask you, so when we are in mainstream education and we learn a certain set of material, and then we're examined on it, and we're given sort of a quantitative a value on our achievements, how is that measured differently, or is it so measured differently in STEM? Do we expect to measure our kids' achievement in the STEM system and our education process that they go through?
So on a day-to-day basis, you cannot measure the outcome. It's not a fast process where you introduce the program initially and that's it. You expect them to be inspired, ready to be creators. Of course not. It's a system of development. You develop yourself. So me starting in 2004 as my academic story, I wasn't today. I am not the same as the person who was there in 2004. Of course, it was a gradual progress, but I think what we will see, the immediate outcome is that they will start questioning. The children will start questioning. I have a subject. I am learning about it. It is great. I'm interested in it. But this teacher, Samia or somebody else, another miss, is teaching me a way of thinking and creating a platform for myself so that I can take myself higher and take myself into a step up in the level of education, of educating myself and actually taking charge of developing myself as well. Because I'm showing them a way that you can become creators, but then you go and do it. You create. So I'll share that with them. Yes, this is how we create. This is the idea. But then here you go. That's the plan for you. Go create this for me and come back to me. And when they come back, we're going to talk about the winning, skills. What did you develop here by creating what you created? So by asking them to go and create a model of the cells, after sharing a picture of a cell and then a video of how a real cell looks, go and create a model for me. And they go and create that model for me and bring it back. They would share an immediate outcome, which is that they have actually questioned themselves, questioned their creativity, and they have become creators of something. And then they have come back to me to share that model and for them to now hear what the model looks like to another pair of eyes, to their colleagues, to their peers, because we do peer advising all the time as scientists and as engineers. We will always go back to our peers and get scrutinized, literally grilled and scrutinized on it, and you just have to grow thick skin to it.
Yeah.
So your immediate outcome is that you are developing something. The other peers, the teacher might not be extremely happy, but they will teach you a way of getting better at it. So they'll show you, do this and that, and this is how you become better. Let's go and achieve it, and then come back, and again and again and again. So immediate outcome is creativity and being able to understand that they can make mistakes and learn from it. But the outcome over the years is that we end up with these innovators, with these problem solvers, with these collaborators, and people who are passionate about what they want to achieve in life.
So we don't necessarily have to expect or, have to realize immediate results, from our children. And I think that's so important the way you explained it, because sometimes if we don't see something immediate or recognizably achieved, we feel that, it might not be worth its while, I think we have to realize that STEM is a gradual process and a gradual development of the child. Like in a nutshell, you could say that it nurtures curiosity. And when you're nurturing curiosity, you're giving opportunities for children, for example, to explore the questions that come alongside that curiosity, right? It's interesting, an American financier, when he spoke about STEM, it was a really profound sentence what he said, and I just think it identifies everything that you said about allowing that growth to happen. He said that millions saw the apple fall, but only Newton asked why.
Absolutely.
So he just that questioning that happens when you feel that you have that platform to question and to explore and to experience. I think it's so beneficial, and it's a great highlight for what STEM portrays and identifies.
Absolutely. And I like that comment, because it actually means that yes, 1 out of a million identified a falling apple, but why can't we make more of Newton?
Absolutely.
Why? And that's what STEM is all about. It's a probability game as well. You have problems in the world. You've got diseases that are being that are in existence for so many years. We can't identify a solution to them, and and there's a lack of people interested in problem solving and innovation. So there's a real problem. So STEM comes in, it creates a generation, a whole generation, whether we start as secondary or primary, it doesn't matter. The generation is getting created, and they're going to go into a workforce that is involved in innovation and creativity, solving problems, disrupting the market, creating what we need to create to the needs for humanity and society. But it's not the one person, it's possibly 10,000. And so the probability of creating a genius has increased immensely. And with art involved now, and I think I've read some research where it says, you could have a scientist with no artistic hobby, they will be just a regular scientist, but then, somebody with an artistic hobby will be 2.8 times more, will have a 2.8 times more chance of getting a Nobel Prize. So art is important, 100%. Creativity is important. Being able to deliver your idea in an artistic fashion is important. It's different. It makes a difference. And so creating tens of thousands of great innovators, great collaborators, engineers, scientists, mathematicians, and technologists is better than creating the one Newton.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. So while we're wrapping up, we have about 5 minutes left of the podcast. I'd love if you'd be able to, because I'm sure the listeners and parents and educators, everyone who's listening, they've realized, the benefits of this, having a STEM education or a STEM opportunity.
Yeah.
Could you give us some tips for parents, for kids of all ages? I don't want anyone to feel that, it's too late or how much is enough. If you could give us some ideas of the kinds of things that we can source out and the kinds of things that we can encourage our kids to take part in, that falls under the STEM umbrella, because sometimes we may not know where to look or what to look for, and it might not be as clear cut as this is a STEM program. So what kind of things would you advise to the parents?
So, I mean, myself, with my son, because obviously I've realized that the mainstream education does not cover what I want them to cover. I have different places where I take my son into. So there is a coding group that deals with coding. My son goes to that every Monday. There is another team that works with robotics, working with Lego. It's just very simple things at this stage, at primary stage. I have encouraged my son, for example, to do a lot of Lego, and it's cost me a lot, but he's now at a stage where he's doing a 16 plus Lego pieces, putting them all together by himself. And I think that's, again, a development that I haven't seen completely straight away. It took a while, but it developed in front of me, and I could see it and I could encourage it. So I think for programs, they do exist. You go online, check any STEM, make sure that it says STEM on the program, that this is part of that, or STEAM if that's the case. The national curriculum has now got STEM part of it. So it does have examples of how you could add on to the core lessons, the core modules, some STEM factors into it. So it does have that. And you can go in there and have a look. It's all online, all readily available for you as a parent. You can log in as a parent. And there is a lot of YouTube channels discussing and lecturing on STEM. So you can always go there as well. I think that's my best advice. But if you are concerned about the different ages, the different years, my child is too late for them to be introduced. Well, look at me. I never received STEM. I never knew about STEM until 2015. And I'm here encouraging everyone to look into it. I still developed myself. I still became successful in research and clinical research, and I love it. I love the products that I deal with. I love the patients that I can actually introduce these products to and create a better life for them. I love the whole thing, and it's successful and it's great. So it didn't affect me, not having STEM, but I would have loved to have it. I think I would have developed a lot more and a lot faster with it. So that's the only thing. But I don't think there's anything for you to be concerned about. It's fine. But yeah, be the encourager. As a parent, encourage your child to get all these skills that we've discussed. Being, absolutely into innovation, curious, wanting to develop themselves, wanting to learn, and being a problem solver, which is what we need. We need more problem solving.
I think that, sometimes when things are not as sort of available across the board in, of every school or every system that we're going through, the competitiveness, you might be faced with a little bit of competitiveness. So, for example, it just depends on what's available out there, but it's probably advisable for parents to look a little bit ahead of time. Like for next summer, look in good
Yep.
few months ahead. Almost, sometimes even programs are established well before, because
Definitely.
they have to look in funding and they have to look at so much things to collaborate to get a program going, that the advertisement of it will come and go, and you might miss the mark. So,
Yeah.
look in good, in advance for programs. And I think also institutions like Imperial College and other universities, they do have formal programs for children over the summer months, for example. But have you also heard, like, because learning doesn't stop,
No.
okay? So I have, like, is this something that, adults can also explore and look into opportunities for, just different ideas?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. So yes, as an adult, you can always develop the skills of STEM to
Mm-hmm.
better yourself,
Mm-hmm.
using the different platforms that I've mentioned, using online. If you want to ask the question to somebody who is into STEM in your community, in your society, then go ahead and do it. They might be able to share and shed some light on it as well. Always approach people. I advise that as well. Like I said, I learned from the engineers, I learned from the people surrounding me. So always
Mm-hmm.
learn from people who are surrounding you, who you know are interested in or are part of that world.
Mm-hmm.
So approach them, talk to them, see what they can advise you on. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think there's any last minute things that you'd want to share with the parents, or even our listeners about, the importance of having that encouraging nature? Because I really liked how you explained that, it's not about just putting a child in a position. That encouragement comes from the home, and it comes from educators, it comes from parents, and it comes
Yeah.
from, because sometimes our children are at our mercy in terms of opportunities that they have. So
Yeah.
we don't expect them to be able to understand and source these things out. So what kind of tips can we give the parents, or any last minute things that you want to share with them?
I think just reiterating on the message that you need to be an encourager, you need to create an environment where your child can inspire to develop into something else, something higher and further, and always supporting them on what they want to achieve. So definitely try to support them by looking at the different content that we've shared with you. Definitely look into talking to people that are within the STEM program if that's what you're interested in, and be an encourager. That's your role. That's the main thing. Encouragement, passionate about education, and you'll see some success in your kids, inshallah.
Inshallah. And I think part and parcel of that encouragement is also the support that you give them, with the understanding that whatever you do within a STEM, platform, and whatever you do within that session, there is no right or wrong. It's just continual development and learning. It's trial and error, and it's exploring, and it's communicating with those around you to share their skills, and working together. I think it's such a nice platform for building collaboration, but also that mirrors how we want society to be in general. We want that respect and collaboration amongst our people in society with each other, and if you can nurture that from a young age for children who are working on a specific project, imagine how then that will develop into their older years, in how they're collaborating and how they're dealing with people around them as well. So there's an aspect of morality development as well there. It's
100%.
patience and morality and respect, and it's a whole it's such a lovely thing to explore and learn from. I wanted to thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm sure our listeners benefited greatly for all of the advice and information that you gave regarding STEM and the development of STEAM now as well in our community. And I hope that our parents do reach out and they do source out programs and workshops and sessions for their children. And no child is too young for it. So inshallah, parents, I hope you enjoyed this session and you refer to it and you do share your thoughts and experiences on the Jafria social platform. And we wish you all a very good night and a Khudafis, and keep safe. And inshallah, till the next podcast. Khudafis.